She has spent 5 iconic decades building an entertainment career as a singer, actress, talk show host, and author.
For decades, she stood on stages around the world, wearing the brightest smile in show business. But behind that smile lived a secret so heavy that even her closest brothers had no idea what she was carrying. Then, at 66 years old, Marie Osmond finally said the words out loud, and the answer she gave shocked everyone who thought they knew her story. The stage she walked away from, the lights at the Flamingo, went dark on the 16th of November, 2019, and something inside Marie quietly shifted that night. After 11 straight years performing alongside her brother Donnie in Las Vegas, after exactly 1,730 shows, after more than 900,000 fans, she walked off that stage knowing the next chapter of her life was going to look completely different. She was tired in a way that money could not fix. Then came the offer that everyone thought would save her. CBS handed her a permanent seat on The Talk in May of 2019. She was sitting next to Sharon Osbourne, Cheryl Underwood, Eve and Carrie and Inaba, and the country watched her settle into daytime television like she had been born for it. But anyone who has ever sat at a table with strong personalities knows that smiles on camera do not always match what happens during the commercial breaks. By April of 2020, the tension behind the scenes had become impossible to hide. Sharon reportedly looked at Marie one day and said, "You are nothing like me." And from that moment forward, something between them never recovered. Insiders later told Page 6 that Sharon and Cheryl threatened to walk away from the show unless Marie was removed. Carrie and Inaba was reportedly the only co-host, fighting to keep her on the panel. When Marie announced her exit in August of 2020, she did not throw a single punch in public. She thanked a producer, John Redman, by name. She joked that she and her husband Steve had not been this alone together since 1982, when their last children left for college. It was classic Marie, kind on the surface, with a quiet refusal to give anyone the drama they were waiting for. While the world expected Marie to launch her own Las Vegas residency, she did the opposite. She walked away from the Strip entirely and started touring with full symphony orchestras instead. She released a classical album called Unexpected on her own record label in December of 2021. Meanwhile, her brother Donnie opened his own solo show at Harrah's Las Vegas on the 31st of August, 2021. So while Donnie stayed where the spotlight was hottest, Marie chose a quieter kind of greatness. And then in 2023, she said something that made the entire entertainment world stop scrolling. She announced she would not be leaving a single dollar of her estimated $20 million fortune to her 7 living children, because self-worth cannot be bought. But the conversations that followed those revelations forced her to revisit a much older wound, one she had only ever spoken about in pieces, and at 66, she was finally ready to put a name on what had truly happened to her as a child. The only girl in a house full of brothers. On the 13th of October, 1959, a little girl named Olive Marie Osmond was born in Ogden, Utah. And here's a detail that almost no one ever mentions. She was born on the exact same day her father, George, turned 42. Same hospital, same birthday, 2 generations sharing one candle on the cake. Her parents took it as a sign from God that this child was meant for something special. They had been praying for a daughter for years, and after 8 sons, they finally had her. Now think about what it actually felt like growing up in that house. 8 older brothers, every single one of them louder, taller, and faster than her. 2 of those brothers, Verl and Tom, were born deaf, which meant the entire family business of singing and performing was built partly to pay for their care. There was no privacy in the Osmond home. There was no quiet bedroom for a little girl to think her own thoughts. Every meal, every game, every conversation happened inside a tornado of male energy, and Marie sat in the middle of it. By the age of 4, in 1964, little Marie was already making her television debut on The Andy Williams Show. For years old, most kids that age are learning to tie their shoes, but Marie was learning camera angles and stage cues. The family moved from Utah to Los Angeles. The brothers signed a 5-year contract, and the Osmond machine started running at full speed. At 11 years old, Marie was sent on a commercial shoot in Japan, and the boat she was filming on actually capsized in shark-filled waters. She had to swim for her life. After being rescued, the producers sent her right back out to keep filming, and she ended up so badly sunburned that her skin blistered. In her memoir, she wrote a sentence that still stings, that in some situations, she was treated more as a product than a person. Read that line again slowly. Then came the moment that changed her belief about life and death forever. In 1975, when Marie was just 16, she was driving a car with her mother in the passenger seat when she suddenly blacked out behind the wheel. The crash was so violent that the steering wheel actually bent from the impact, and Marie nearly lost an eye. Her mother went through the windshield and suffered collapsed lungs. Doctors warned Marie that her mother might not survive the night. While she sat alone in the hospital, terrified that she had just killed her own mom, Marie said she experienced a clear vision of her late grandfather telling her not to worry, that he was not there to take her mother home. Her mom survived. Marie has called it a game changer for her belief in the afterlife to this day. That moment of grace would have been enough trauma for any teenager to carry for a lifetime. But Marie was already hiding something much darker beneath the surface, something the cameras and the stadium lights had been quietly covering up for years. The producer who called her fat. By the time Marie turned 15, the family had landed the biggest break of their lives. ABC handed Donnie and Marie their own variety show in 1976, and almost overnight, she became one of the most recognized teenage girls on the planet. To viewers at home, it looked magical. To Marie, the truth behind the curtain was something most people would never believe. She has gone on the record saying she worked 18-hour days, 6 days a week, memorizing 350 pages of script every 2.5 days. Think about that for a second. She was 15 years old. And then came the moment that broke something inside her that took decades to heal. Marie told Page Six in January of 2023 that one of the studio executives pulled her aside in a parking lot behind the lot one day. She stood about 5 feet 5 inches tall. She weighed 103 pounds. And this grown man looked at this teenage girl and told her she was an embarrassment to her family. He told her she was fat. He told her that 250 people on the show were going to lose their jobs because she could not keep food out of her. And I am going to leave the rest of that quote out because of how cruel it was. She told Fox News Digital in 2019 that from that moment forward, she would literally starve herself for 3 days before every taping. She survived on nothing but lemon water mixed with cayenne pepper and maple syrup. That recipe, by the way, is the same starvation method that Beyoncé would later use to drop weight for the film Dreamgirls 30 years later. Marie's weight dropped to 92 pounds. The hits did not stop coming. Marie has openly shared that the legendary comedian Groucho Marx, who was elderly and in a wheelchair when he guest starred on her show, actually pinched her behind. She has called him a dirty old man in interviews. She was a teenage girl, and a Hollywood icon felt entitled to her body in front of everyone. That was the world she was living in. Every week, she stood next to women like Cher, Farrah Fawcett, Jaclyn Smith, Cheryl Ladd, and Raquel Welch, and she felt invisible beside them. She later wrote that next to Cher, she felt like the ugly duckling. The only bright light during those years was a friendship most people never knew existed. The television legend Lucille Ball took Marie under her wing. The two of them would sit at Lucy's house playing Scrabble for hours, while the older woman shared stories from decades in Hollywood. For a girl drowning in male executives and male critics, finally having a powerful woman in her corner felt like coming up for air. Then, in 1978, came a casting offer that would have changed everything for her. The producers of the movie Grease offered Marie the role of Sandy. She turned it down. She told Watch What Happens Live in 2016 that the part felt too edgy, and she did not like the idea that the female lead had to turn bad just to get a man's attention. She believed the man should work to earn the girl, not the other way around. Olivia Newton-John eventually got the role. The producers softened the character for her, and the rest became cinema history. But Marie does not regret it. What none of those producers, none of those co-stars, and none of those millions of viewers knew was that the smiling teenage girl on their television screen was carrying a secret so heavy that she could barely walk under it. And next, you are going to hear, in her own words, exactly what she was hiding, the secret she carried for 40 years. For nearly 40 years, Marie Osmond kept the most painful chapter of her life completely private. Her own brothers did not know. Her closest friends did not know. The man she eventually married did not know for years. Then, in 2001, she released a book called Behind the Smile, and inside that book, she finally wrote down the words she had been swallowing since childhood. She had been sexually abused multiple times by multiple people. She has said clearly that the abusers were not members of her family. They were not her parents. They were not her brothers. They were people her family trusted. They were people who happened to be in places her parents believed were safe. And every single time it happened, the person hurting her threatened her into staying quiet. She has said she truly believed that if she told the truth, her brothers would be harmed, her parents would lose everything, and the family business would collapse overnight. So she did what so many child victims do. She buried it. When Larry King interviewed her about the book in 2009, Marie did not flinch. She told him plainly that the abuse was real, that it was sexual, and that her sense of personal boundaries had been destroyed from a very young age. Years later, in 2018, she sat down with Dr. Oz and said something that revealed she had finally made peace with her past. She told him that the people who did those things to her are now dead. Just that one sentence. It carried more weight than any speech could have. But the moment that truly stopped me, and will stop you too, came on the talk on the 21st of October, 2019. Marie looked into the camera and admitted that as a child of 8 or 9 years old, she genuinely believed she might be gay. And the reason was not that she was actually gay. The reason was that the abuse had made her so afraid of men and so disgusted by them that she could not imagine ever wanting one near her. That confusion stayed with her for years. She thought something was permanently broken inside her. What ultimately healed her was the very thing that had once felt overwhelming, being the only girl in a house full of brothers. Watching her father, George, love her mother. Watching Alan, Wayne, Merrill, Jay, Donnie, Jimmy, Verl, and Tom protect her, lift her up, and treat her with gentleness, even when they did not understand why she sometimes pulled away. Slowly, year by year, her brothers and her father quietly rewrote what a man could be in her mind. She has said it directly. The reason God gave her so many great brothers and a father like the one she had was so that she could learn to trust men again. And here's what makes the next part so powerful. At 66 years old, after all those years of partial answers, Marie finally went one step further. She named the kind of man who had done it, not by giving a single name, because she has chosen to protect her family from a public legal storm, but by describing exactly the type of person we should all be watching out for. Men who used proximity to her parents as a shield. She named the playbook, and in doing so, she gave thousands of other survivors permission to finally do the same. But just when Marie was beginning to feel like the worst parts of her life were finally behind her, a brand new pain was already waiting in the next room. And this one had nothing to do with her childhood, the closet floor, and the 200-mile drive. In 1999, after years of trying to build the picture-perfect family, Marie gave birth to her 7th child, a boy named Matthew. She thought she was prepared. She had been a mother for 16 years already. She had raised babies before. But something happened to her body and her brain after Matthew was born that she had never experienced in her life. The sadness came in like a wave that would not stop. The exhaustion was so deep that she could not move from the floor for some days. And underneath all of it lived a kind of shame she could not even put into words. In her memoir, she described a scene that I think every parent reading this should sit with for a moment. She was alone in her closet. She had collapsed into a pile of her own shoes. And she wrote that it felt like she was looking down a long, dark tunnel with the exit sealed shut. Another day, she was sitting on her own kitchen floor sobbing so hard her body was shaking, and the only thought in her head was, "This cannot possibly be me." Then came the day she did something she still cannot fully explain. She handed her nanny her bank card and a stack of blank checks. She told the woman that there was something deeply wrong with her, and she had to leave until she figured out what it was. And then she got in her car and drove 200 miles up the California coast. Her marriage was already cracking by that point. Marie and Brian Blosel, the man she had married on the 28th of October, 1986, had already separated once briefly in 1998. They reconciled, but the foundation was never quite the same. And then in August of 2005, a fire broke out in their family home. Her husband Brian saved the children by quickly closing the garage door to slow the flames. The house survived. Marie later wrote that the fire did something strange to her marriage. It magnified for her every single way that she and Brian had quietly drifted apart over the years. The flames did not destroy the marriage. They just made her finally see what was already gone. Then, in August of 2006, came the moment that the tabloids ran with for weeks. Marie was suddenly hospitalized, and certain magazines immediately ran headlines, claiming she had attempted to take her own life. Her team pushed back hard. Her spokesperson explained that Marie had simply had a bad reaction to a medication she was taking and had blacked out. Her longtime manager, Carl Engelman, told reporters that dealing with the tabloids was like punching jello. But the damage to her reputation was done, and the next year, in 2007, Marie and Brian quietly finalized their divorce after 21 years of marriage. She thought that was rock bottom. And then the phone call came that would split her life into a before and an after, the kind of call that no mother on earth ever wants to receive. The phone call she missed. In the fall of 2007, just months after her divorce, Marie did something nobody saw coming. She joined the cast of Dancing with the Stars. She was 48 years old. She had just lost 50 pounds on a strict eating plan. And honestly, this is the part of her story I love the most, because her son Stephen Jr. had finally sat her down and told her the truth. He said, "Mom, we're going to lose you. You are going to die. You need to lose the weight." So she did it for him. She danced her way to a third-place finish. But during one episode, the country watched her samba beautifully across the floor, finish her routine, and then suddenly collapse right there on live television while the judges were giving their critique. The whole studio froze. Host Tom Bergeron rushed over. When she finally opened her eyes, the first two words out of Marie's mouth were, "Oh crap, that is who she is." Even in a medical emergency, the woman cracked a joke. The success of that season led directly to the biggest professional reunion of her life. In September of 2008, Marie and her brother Donnie opened a residency at the Flamingo in Las Vegas. It was supposed to be a 6-week trial run. It ended up running for 11 straight years. At the peak of that show, each sibling was reportedly earning $1.6 million per year plus 40% of the ticket sales. That is what you call a comeback. Then came 2009, which became one of the hardest years of her life. Even before the worst one, Marie made the decision to fire her manager, Carl Engelman, after 35 years working together. Now here is the part most people miss. Carl Engelman was not just her manager. He was the father-in-law of the legendary host Larry King. So when Marie walked into Carl's hotel room at 5 in the morning on the 12th of September, 2009, and told him their professional relationship was over, she was severing a personal connection that ran through some of the most powerful living rooms in Hollywood. Her lawyer, Marty Singer, told the press that Carl had breached his fiduciary duty to her. Carl pushed back with his own lawsuit. Eventually, the two sides settled in private arbitration. But the trust was gone. That same year, Marie's daughter Jessica came out to her as gay. And here is what made Marie's response so quietly revolutionary for a woman raised in the Mormon faith. She did not hesitate. She told a Los Angeles radio station that she believed every person should have the right to share their home and finances with someone they love. She has since walked her daughter down the aisle. She flew in for Jessica's wedding to her wife Sarah in June of 2019, and she has said many times that God did not make only one color of flower. He made many, but none of that prepared her for what happened on the 26th of February, 2010. Around 9 o'clock that Friday night, her 18-year-old son, Michael Blosel, jumped from the 8th floor of his apartment building in downtown Los Angeles. He was a fashion student. He left a note that broke the world's heart. In that note, he wrote that he had no friends and that he could never fit in anywhere. Toxicology reports later confirmed there was no presence of illegal substances or alcohol in his system. It was simply pain, the kind of pain depression creates that nobody else can see. When Marie spoke to Oprah about it later that year, she said something that I want you to read very slowly. She said that when she heard Michael tell her he had no friends, it brought her right back to her own depression, because that was exactly how she had felt during her worst days. She had told him she would be there on Monday. She had promised him it was going to be okay. But she said the truth. She learned that night was simple and devastating. Depression does not wait until Monday. The phone had rung the night he died, while she was on stage in Vegas, and she had missed his last call. She has carried that missed call ever since. 2 weeks after the funeral, Marie went back on stage in Las Vegas. People were angry. People sent her cruel letters. People said terrible things about a grieving mother. But she has explained, very clearly, why she did it. The stage was her safe place. If she did not get back up that one time, she knew in her bones that she might never get back up again. She did it for Michael. She did it for her other children. She did it because she had to teach them that you keep living, even when living feels impossible. And then in May of 2011, the universe finally handed her one good surprise. She remarried her first husband, Stephen Craig, in Las Vegas. She actually wore the same wedding dress she had worn the very first time she married him back in 1982. She said in interviews that nothing is ever an accident, and that God simply has his own timing for things. 26 years apart, and the same two hearts finally found their way back to each other. The brother she drove to see. By the time 2025 arrived, Marie was finally entering a season of her life that felt steady. The grief over Michael was still there, but it had softened into something she could carry. The talk drama was behind her. Her symphonic Christmas tours were selling out across America. Her marriage to Steve was happy. Her daughter Jessica was happily married. Her 7 remaining children were healthy. And then on the first day of January, 2025, she got the kind of news that knocks the wind out of any sibling. Her brother Wayne, who had been Wayne Osmond to the entire world but had been her older brother and lifelong protector to her, suffered a massive stroke and died at the age of 73. He had already survived a 17-hour brain tumor surgery back in 1997. He had survived radiation. He had lost his hearing and needed a cochlear implant. He had survived another stroke back in 2012 that had ended his ability to play guitar. Wayne had been fighting his body for nearly 30 years, and he had been winning every round. Until that morning, her brother Donnie broke the news first on Instagram on the 2nd of January. He wrote that Wayne had been the ultimate optimist, the brother who brought light and laughter to everyone who knew him. But it was Marie's post a few days later, on the 8th of January, that made me actually stop and put my phone down. She wrote that just a few weeks before Wayne's death, she had felt something inside her telling her to drive out and visit him. She did not know why. She just knew she had to go. She listened to that quiet feeling. She made the trip. She spent hours with her brother, just talking, just being near him, just being his sister one more time. And then she said the words that I will probably remember for a long time. She wrote that she will cherish the hours she spent with him for the rest of her life. She had no idea, when she got back in her car after that visit, that just a few days later Wayne would have the stroke that would end his life. Sometimes the universe whispers to you, and Marie listened. Most of us would have put off that trip. Most of us would have told ourselves we would visit next month. She did not, and that one decision gave her one of the most precious memories of her entire life. Today, Marie Osmond is 66 years old. She is still touring with full symphony orchestras. She is still defending her Mormon faith in podcast interviews. She is still raising money for Children's Miracle Network Hospitals, the charity she helped co-found back in 1983, which has now raised more than $9 billion for sick children around the world. She has had 17 tumors removed from her body. She has buried her son, Michael. She has buried her mother, Olive. She has buried her father, George. She has now buried her brother, Wayne. And she has decided that when her own time comes, she will not be leaving a single dollar of her $20 million fortune to any of her children, because she truly believes that money is the thief of motivation, and that the greatest gift she can give them is the example of her own work ethic. Marie has finally named, in her own way, what was done to her as a child. She has finally said it plainly enough that the rest of the world cannot pretend it never happened. And she has given thousands of other women Women who were hurt by trusted family friends and trusted business associates and trusted men who used proximity as a weapon. Permission to finally speak out. Share your honest thoughts about Marie's decision to leave nothing to her children, and whether her brave words about her abuse changed the way you see her story.